Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has been sworn in for a second time after a landslide election win last week. But the victory comes amid ongoing tensions with China that have grown since Ms Takaichi made controversial remarks on Taiwan last November. Let's speak to Donna Weeks, emeritus professor at Musashino University Tokyo. Now, Donna, firstly, can you remind us again of those remarks Sanae Takaichi made that were so offensive to China last year?
Yes, she basically went further than Japan had gone previously to say that she would basically come in and support any incursion that China might have on towards Taiwan, basically come in and support Taiwan in a way that hadn't been quite articulated as strongly as before. And she's been, not tentatively, but she has been backing off that a little bit over the last 3 months until the election at least.
How have ties with China deteriorated since Sanae Takaichi came to power?
Yes, look, they have. We see a lot of rhetoric coming, particularly from the Foreign Ministry, their spokespeople. We see them on the news quite regularly, really criticising Takaichi and what she's planning to do. The tensions are rising. Chinese nationals have been advised by the government to not travel to Japan, which, I saw some figures today that said basically the tourism numbers from overseas have dropped about 5%, and that's largely on the back of Chinese tourists being cautious and not going to Japan, and particularly this time, of course, with Chinese New Year, it's previously been a very popular time for many Chinese to go to Japan, and that's having quite an effect. It's flowing through to the economy. People who had anticipated a lot of Chinese tourists, of course, aren't getting. Australia's doing a pretty good job getting back there, with rising numbers there, of course. But no, it is creating enormous tensions, I think.
Well, tell us a bit more about how it's impacting the average Japanese citizen and local businesses.
Well, it's a two-edged kind of thing at the moment because, of course, there is the issue of over-tourism, which I think we get the headlines of quite a lot. And on the one hand, too many tourists are going to the very popular spots. But I have seen, interviews with hotel owners, restaurant owners, people who would normally anticipate large groups of Chinese tourists on group packages or similar things, who just aren't turning up. And so there've been cancellations and all these sorts of things. So it is having that impact economically for those who might be directly affected.
Voters in Japan, though, don't seem too concerned. They've returned Ms Takaichi to power. She had a big election win.
She did, yes. And this is the thing. This is the point, I think, that we're going to see a really interesting balance. She was, of course, confirmed again today in Parliament as the Prime Minister with that majority. Now, what does this mean? It seems people were drawn to Takaichi because of her strong rhetoric towards China. Some people are saying she has strong leadership credentials in this way. And what we'll be anticipating, particularly in a couple of days, she will have to give a speech to Parliament. It's common practice for the Prime Minister to outline the key points of the platform that they want to see passed in the parliamentary session from now on. And I expect, her proposals towards. She's very much a part of the Indo-Pacific that is popular here in Australia. She'll very much want to push that agenda, as well as the other important things that people are probably more concerned about, which are things like the cost of living, reducing the consumption tax, or what we would call our GST, was a big agenda item, policy proposal from all the parties, things that she's going to do that. I think it's going to be an interesting balance between the popularity that she clearly garnered during the election, but how is that now going to be put into place? How is she actually going to prosecute that agenda that she seem to have got a mandate for, but it's one thing to garner all that popularity. It's quite another to get that all through Parliament over the next until July, I think. So it'll be a great thing to watch.
What can you tell us about who she's chosen for her cabinet?
Well, it does appear that she hasn't made any changes to the cabinet. That's just recently, in the last hour or so, been announced. So it does appear she's staying with the same team, which does mean she hasn't raised the number of women cabinet ministers, which I guess a lot of people were anticipating. But in terms of Australia, I guess that means Motegi remains the foreign minister, Koizumi remains the defence minister. So these are the people that will have the most interaction, I guess, at the moment with Australia in the foreseeable future.
And given what's happened with China in recent months, how do you think she'll approach Beijing going forward? Will she, like you said, you mentioned she might change her tone somewhat?
She might, but, the next big visit we're anticipating for her is she is going to visit the United States to meet with US President Trump. And I think she's very much a Trump supporter and wants to see that part of the relationship, really go ahead. But what that will do with the relationship with China, I think, will, again, increase rising tensions for Australia as well. We're kind of tied up in AUKUS. I think this is going to be an important feature of regional security in the next little while, as China will be looking to Australia, Japan. What's happening with AUKUS? Where's that going? We have to be really careful too, I think, watching this Japan-China relationship develop because of the implications it will have for us in the region as well.
Yes, we're keeping a close eye on how Beijing responds as well. It seems that China still considers that those remarks in November a sore point. Over the weekend, the Chinese foreign minister told Western leaders Takaichi's comments were a very dangerous development.
Yes.
In the big scheme of things, though, how dangerous is the situation at the moment?
Yes, look, the tensions are always there. I recall when Scott Morrison was Prime Minister, and I used to keep a tally of all the times that Australia-China relations were mentioned on the Japanese news, because it was often brought up as an example of what China might do to Japan if our Prime Minister became as outspoken as Scott Morrison did, particularly over the COVID, the origins of COVID and the pandemic. Now, that, of course, created tensions in the relationship, the trade relationship and so on, which we're seeing with Japan and China at the moment. Those tensions have been there for a long time, but it really, and Takaichi does have this reputation as being quite hawkish, quite towards the right. And so, look, I'm anxiously anticipating what might happen with Japan and China. I think it'll be very significant for us here in Australia to follow as well.
Like we all are. Donna Weeks from Musashino University, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure, Yvonne. Thank you.